In this crazy world, it's so hard to unwind. So I'm taking time just for me. Gonna find my peace, let my soul be free. In the quiet moments, that's where I'll find a little room to breathe and leave it all behind. Give me room to breathe, I need some time to heal my heart, to clear my mind. Gonna love myself, yeah, I believe in the power of me. Just give me room to breathe.
Hey, welcome back to the Room to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Life Coach 614, and I'm so happy that you've made space to be here with us today. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I need for everybody to do me a quick favor. If you are feeling the vibes, go ahead and show us some love. Tap the screen, like, comment, but most importantly, I need you to share this out with someone who could use a little healing energy today. And if this is your first time here or you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that follow button. Subscribe to our channel so that way you're always tapped in when a new episode drops. I also want to personally invite everyone to check out our digital home at theselfcareclub.org, where you will find everything you need from affirmative apparel to motivational merch, as well as a ton of free resources to help remind you that you don't have to do this alone. We are healing in community, growing one breath, one moment, one day at a time. So today, I encourage you to give yourself permission to pause, to make space for peace, for growth, but most importantly for you. And if you are feeling the vibe and something resonates with you, be sure to drop some green hearts in the chat. That is our community's way of saying I am healing, I am growing, and I am showing up for me. Now, let's get ready to breathe, reflect, and grow together. Welcome in, Monique. I see you bright and, first in the class over on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here. Wasted Wellness. We've got Brooks and Lethal, Pretty Girl Hardy. Who else we got in the building? Papa Smurf. Oh, I'm trying to scroll back, y'all. Everybody drop green hearts in the chat so I see you. I know Tania's here. We had Craig Keenan in the house. Who else is in here, y'all? Melody. Goodness gracious. There's so much stuff flying up on the screens right now, y'all. I'm trying to keep up. If I did not call your name, charge it to my head, not my heart. Farah, I see you. Melody, I see you. But yeah, welcome in everybody. Happy Thursday. Or before the live, we decided maybe it's still Wednesday or maybe we need to just jump till Friday. But hey, it is what it is. Happy day, right? And yeah, I'm super excited about the conversation today. It's I don't know if it's really a challenge. I just think it's an interesting conversation. I like to put a shift on things. Lady Blue, I see you. I like to put a shift on things. And so it's like when I hear something, my brain tends to process it a little differently than most people. And so today we're going to talk about a phrase that I know that many of us have heard. Welcome in, Shamika. I see you. Thank you. So we're going to talk about a phrase that I know that most of us have heard before, but I'm going to process it a little differently with y'all today. Brooks will be happy because this is her unhinged, coach talking today. So let's just roll with it. Okay. But okay, this phrase typically shows up when somebody has tested your patience one too many times. Okay. And the phrase that I'm thinking of or talking about today is F around and find out. Shonda, welcome in. Listen, F around and find out. Now, everybody knows that phrase, right? And let's be honest for a second. That phrase does not come from peace. Okay? It doesn't come from calm. It doesn't come from sitting, cross-legged and meditation, drinking herbal tea. No. Okay? That phrase comes from somebody who has already tried to be nice, tried to be patient, tried to be understanding, right? And now their last nerve is just like hanging on by a thread. It's the warning shot. Exactly. Jordan, welcome in. Right? It's the moment that somebody says, okay, keep playing with me. But eventually you're going to discover what my silence is, right? Eventually you're going to F around and find out. And if we're being real, some of us have lived in this energy before, right? We've lived in this energy too long. Thank you for the heart, me butterfly. Welcome in. And so, in the situation, for those of you who have lived this life, right? Y'all ain't new to this. Y'all true to this F around and find out lifestyle. You're the one who's been trying to explain yourself, trying to give people grace, trying to communicate like a grown adult. But some people only understand consequences, right? What I tell y'all, sometimes you got to speak to them demons in the language that they understand. And so eventually the energy shifts from, let me explain this to you, to you gonna learn today. Now, look, y'all don't look at me like that, because I know that some of y'all are laughing because y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. Sis said, this is my message today. I think this is all of our message today, because it's been that kind of week. You know what I mean? But here's where, healing starts to kind of shift that conversation, guys. Because as I've grown, as I've done the work, as I've sat with myself long enough to unpack my own triggers and patterns, I have started to realize that a lot of the time when we end up in that F around and find out situation, it's because we ignored the signs earlier. Right? I mean, be for real. We ignored our gut feeling. We ignored red flags. We ignore the moment that our spirit whispered, this ain't right. This ain't it. Right? But we stayed anyway. And when I'm talking about, we stayed explaining. We stayed over explaining. We stayed, trying to be understood by people who had already decided that they weren't going to listen in the first place. And so eventually, the situation now escalates. India, welcome back. And so now everybody's surprised when the calm person finally snaps, right? Because they done poked the bear all day. And now that, we ready to pop off, everybody's clutching their pearls like, oh my God, why is she acting like that? Like, everybody want to be surprised. But see, healing teaches you something different, right? Healing introduces another way to move. And listen, don't worry, I'm not going to take y'all's phrase from y'all. I'm just going to give it new meaning, because we F around and find out 24/7. But healing has taught me to feel around and find out. Can y'all put that in the chat? Feel around and find out. Y'all can even put F around and find out if it make you feel better. See, that version of F around and find out moves quieter. That version pays attention, right? See, when you feel around and find out, you start noticing how people move before things escalate. You feel the shift in the energy. You feel the tone change in someone's voice, right? You start to feel when people's actions don't match their words. And instead of waiting until you crash out, you simply sit back and observe, right? You feel the situation. You watch the patterns, and you let people reveal exactly who they are. There's no yelling required. There's no dramatic exit required. It's just clarity, right? And let me tell you something. Sometimes that quiet clarity is way more powerful than the loud reaction. Because when you move with awareness instead of anger, you don't have to threaten consequences, right? People tend to run into them on their own. And I'm not saying that, the petty part of your spirit has to disappear, because let's be real. Sometimes the healed version of you still sits back and says, okay, so this what we doing, right? It's cool, proceed, right? We give people just enough rope to do what they need to do with it. But, as you go through your healing process, now you are watching with discernment instead of emotions. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The difference between those two energies, the F around and find out versus the feel around and find out. One is reactive. The other one is just aware. One explodes after the damage is done, and the other protects peace before things even get that far. So if anything in today's conversation resonates, just drop them green hearts so I know I'm not alone in this, okay? You know, that's our way of saying I'm healing, I'm growing, I'm showing up for me. AKA, don't push me. I'm too close to the edge. You might F around and find out, right? All right, so let's just jump into it. I want to start with the energy of F around and find out. All right, let's just get on into it. Now, this phrase didn't come from nowhere. We know that phrase has history, okay? It is the energy that shows up when somebody has been playing with you like you're the demo version of a video game. Pushing all your buttons, testing your limits, acting like your kindness means weakness. And eventually, something inside of you says, oh, so this the game we playing. Cool. Let's proceed. All right? Because F around and find out is not the first stage. That's not the first level. We don't just jump into that. And that's the part that I think that people misunderstand, right? Nobody wakes up peaceful and emotionally regulated and immediately jumps into that find out mode. There's levels to this, right? There were multiple attempts at grace before that. We know that we woke up, we showed up, and, you know, we explained ourselves. You communicated clearly. You tried to be patient. You gave them the benefit of the doubt, the benefit of the doubt's cousin, and sometimes even the benefit of the doubt's parole officer. Like, you handed out all the benefits of doubt. And still, they kept playing. They crossed the line once. They spun the block, doubled back, did it again and again and again, until eventually the polite version of you just steps aside, and the part of you that believes in life lessons or educational consequences, that's what I like to call them, right? Life lessons, aka educational consequences. That's a new word for y'all. Add that to y'all vocabulary. But you know, again, you keep giving them the benefit of the doubt, and then all of a sudden, old Helen, she got to go. The niceness gone. Because sometimes life teaches lessons that words simply cannot. And sometimes people don't understand boundaries until they experience what happens when they cross them. See, that's that find out stage. And let's be real for a second. Some people only respect a boundary after they run into it. Not when you explain it, not when you warn them, but when you finally realize, when they finally realize, like, oh, shit, she was serious. She was not bluffing, right? Because, see, that's the moment when the energy shifts from conversation to consequences. And now, here's the petty truth that a lot of us don't say out loud. Nelly, welcome in. Aisha, welcome back. Sometimes when people keep pushing, there's a small part of you that sits back and says, you know what? Go ahead. Proceed. Carry on, right? Because the lesson that, you're about to learn is going to be way more memorable than anything that I could have explained. Welcome in, Danielle. So it's like when people do stuff, sometimes you just sit back and you're like, yeah, go ahead, do you. Go ahead. Keep pushing on my buttons. Because, baby, I'm finna show you. Right? We from that show me state. I could show you better than I could tell you. And, that's not always meaning that we're going to show up with a toxic reaction. Sometimes it's just boundaries finally being enforced. Right? And so when you get into that healing, there's this deeper layer that starts to be enforced with those boundaries. Because again, we have the boundaries. Many of us just don't enforce the boundaries. And if we're being honest, a lot of the time when we end up in a F around and find out situation, it's simply because we stayed in the situation longer than we should have. We ignored those early signs. We brushed off the red flags. We convinced ourselves that maybe they didn't mean it like that. Maybe they'll do better. Maybe this time will be different. Perhaps I'm overreacting, right? Meanwhile, your intuition is in the background, like, excuse me, ma'am, we need to exit. But what do? We stay, right? We stay because we want to believe the best in people. We're nice like that. We love to see the potential in people because we don't want to seem dramatic. We're trying to give people grace. We're trying to change, Jordan, right? I'm trying to be the bigger person. And listen, grace, we too comfortable. Right? And see, the thing about grace is beautiful until grace turns into self-betrayal. Until grace turns into tolerating disrespect. Until grace turns into constantly shrinking yourself to keep the peace. Now, grace ain't that pretty, right? And see, eventually, peace leaves the building, right? Because if you sit in a situation being, bombarded with people, just stepping over your boundaries over and over again, peace can't live here. So no matter how much you try to be the bigger person, no matter how much grace you extend, if you are continuously shrinking yourself, peace is going to leave regardless. Because the person who keeps testing you finally runs into the version of you that says, okay, you didn't ask for this lesson. Now class is open. You see what I'm saying? Now, again, I'm not trying to glorify chaos. I am not encouraging y'all to crash out. I'm just simply saying, since we extend in grace, if you happen to crash out, show yourself some grace afterwards, right? Because, again, we're being honest in this room. Sometimes growth includes recognizing the moments where your patience has been taken for granted. Exactly. Right? All those situations where your kindness was misread as a weakness. Where someone thought you were soft simply because you were choosing peace. But we got to understand that peace doesn't mean powerless. Do I need to say that again? Peace does not mean powerless. See, a peaceful person simply chooses when to engage and when to walk away. And, the truth is, the moment somebody hears F around and find out energy from you, that means that they have already ignored 5 early signs. Because the healed version of you doesn't just jump straight into chaos. We don't just wake up and choose violence. But sometimes as the morning progresses, we got to lace up our Air Force Ones. See, I know that the healed version of you tries awareness first, right? We try. Which brings us to the shift that we're about to talk about next. Because healing doesn't just, teach you how to enforce your boundaries. Healing also teaches you how to recognize situations before they even reach that point. Not F around and find out, but feel around and find out. And trust me, that shift changes everything. So there's a wisdom that comes with feel around and find out. So now that we've talked about the reaction energy, right? The F around and find out is the reaction energy. But I want to shift and talk about the healing energy because that's what we're doing. We're healing. And, healing introduces a completely different way of moving through life. Not the F around and find out, but the feel around and find out. Now, I know that sounds softer, but don't mistake softer for weaker. See, feel around and find out is actually the move of someone who has learned their lessons already, right? This is the energy of somebody who has, had enough experiences, enough heartbreaks, enough disappointments, enough emotional exhaustion. And so because this person has experienced enough, they start to realize that I don't have to wait until things blow up to understand what's happening. I can feel it early. When you start to notice the shift of energy when you walk into a room, you start recognizing patterns of how people speak to you. You start hearing things that aren't being said. And suddenly life becomes less about arguing with people and more about just observing them. Because let's be honest, when somebody shows you who they are, they rarely do it all at once, right? They reveal themselves in little moments, little slips, little behaviors, little comments, little inconsistencies. And so the healed version of us, or the unhealed version of us used to kind of ignore those moments. We brushed it off. We tell ourselves, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Meanwhile, your intuition is sitting there like, girl, I know you saw that shit. You heard what they said. You see how they moving. But you're so busy trying to give people the benefit of the doubt that you're ignoring the evidence that is right in front of you. But see, the healed version of you is moving differently. You're not quick to accuse people, but you're also not quick to dismiss what you feel. See, you notice it. You observe it. You sit back and you collect the information. Not in like a paranoid way, but in a present and aware kind of way. Because discernment is quiet. Discernment doesn't scream. It just sits back and it watches. It notices when somebody's words don't match their behavior. It notices when somebody's energy changes depending on who's around. It notices when somebody celebrates you publicly, but then competes with you privately. Discernment doesn't need drama, right? It just needs attention. And here's the beautiful part about moving this way. When you live, in a feel around, find out energy, you don't end up, shocked by people anymore. You're not blindsided. You're not sitting there saying, wow, didn't see that coming. Because you did see it. You felt it. You noticed it. Right? You just didn't react immediately. You allowed the situation to reveal itself fully. And sometimes, the petty part of you is just sitting back watching the whole thing unfold. Like, oh, wow. Here they go, telling on themselves again. Go ahead. Continue. I'm taking notes. Because discernment is the ability to let people show you their character without interrupting them. And listen, one of the most powerful things that healing teaches you is that you don't have to expose people. People will expose themselves. All you have to do is watch. All you have to do is listen. All you have to do is stay present long enough to notice the pattern. And see, that's the shift right there. Because when you move through life with an awareness instead of a reaction, you avoid a lot of unnecessary chaos. You stop engaging in arguments that were never about the truth. You stop defending yourself to people who already decided how they feel about you. You stop trying to convince people to respect boundaries that they were never intending to respect. Instead, you just adjust your access. You adjust your distance. You adjust your expectations quietly, right? And sometimes the most powerful form of peace is when someone doesn't even realize that you've changed how you move around them. It's like you're still polite, you're still kind, you're still respectful, but internally, you already shifted. Thank you. Right? You felt the situation. And, you found out everything that you needed to know. I felt around, I done found out. No explosion required. No dramatic speech required. Just clarity. And see, that kind of clarity is real healing. And y'all know the body keeps score, right? So when we think about this F around and find out, you have to understand that your body knows before your mind does. I think one of the biggest lessons that healing teaches you is that your body is often, telling the truth long before your mind can accept it. There are moments in life where something just feels off and you can't quite explain it yet. It's like you walk into a room and your energy shifts. Your stomach tightens. Your chest gets heavy. Your spirit gets quiet. And nothing dramatic has happened yet, but something inside of you is telling you to pay attention. That feeling right there is information. It's your intuition picking up on subtle cues before your mind has gathered enough evidence to make sense of it all. And, the challenge is that many of us were taught to distrust those signals. We were taught to override them with logic and politeness or the desire to keep the peace. So instead of listening to that internal nudge, we start negotiating with ourselves. We tell ourselves that we're overthinking. We convince ourselves that we're being too sensitive. We try to explain away the behavior that our body has already recognized as uncomfortable or unsafe. Meanwhile, your intuition is sitting there like, no, right? What you felt was real. The problem isn't that you misread the moment. The problem is that you were trained to doubt your own awareness. And, a lot of people don't realize that intuition isn't mystical in the way that people make it sound. It's just actually your mind processing patterns faster than your conscious thoughts can catch up. Your brain has seen certain tones of the voice before, right? It has felt certain energies before. It recognizes certain behaviors before they actually reveal themselves. So your body reacts first. It's like an internal alarm, an alarm system that just kind of sits there quietly and whispers, hey, pay attention. But when you've spent years ignoring the alarm, we just stop trusting it. We become numb to it, right? We convince ourselves that we need more proof before we allow ourselves to respond. And this is where the shift comes from F around and find out to feel around and find out, right? Instead of ignoring those early signals and waiting for the situation to explode, you start honoring what your body is communicating. You don't necessarily jump to the conclusions, or accuse people of anything, but you stay aware. You notice how somebody speaks to you. You notice how other people treat you. You notice whether their words and their actions line up. And while you're observing, you give yourself permission to trust what you were sensing without immediately talking yourself out of it. And sometimes that awareness saves you from unnecessary drama, because when you trust your intuition, you start recognizing situations before they escalate. You notice the tension early. You see the patterns forming. You understand the direction something is headed before, you're fully invested in it. And that kind of awareness protects your peace. It allows you to step back, adjust your energy, or, create distance without having to fight your way out of the situation later. Welcome in, CC. Thank you for the gifts. And the truth is, many of the situations that eventually turn into a F around and find out moment started, with a quiet signal that we ignored. A feeling that we brushed off. A moment where we rationalized, the feeling or the signal away because we didn't want to believe that we were noticing it. But healing teaches you that your awareness is not the enemy. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. Sometimes the most powerful thing that you can do is simply acknowledge what you feel and give yourself permission to trust it. Because when you begin to trust your intuition again, you start moving through life differently. You're not constantly shocked by people's behavior. You're not blindsided by situations that slowly reveal themselves. You're paying attention while things are unfolding. You're feeling the situation in real time. And see, that awareness is how you find out everything that you need to know without having to crash out to gain clarity. And one of the biggest signs that healing is actually happening in your life is when the same type of situation shows up and you respond differently. Like, I think that's when you realize that growth isn't always about you. How do I want to say this? Growth isn't always about you having to remove challenges, right? Sometimes growth is about you just recognizing it sooner. The same personalities might appear, the same types of conversations might happen, the same dynamics might try to replay themselves over and over again. But the difference is this version of you standing in the moment now has a completely different level of awareness. See, before healing, those situations used to pull you in. You felt obligated to explain yourself, to defend yourself, or to try to make people understand your intentions. You might have spent hours replaying conversations in your head over and over again, wondering, what you could have said differently, or what you should have done differently, or trying to convince somebody to see you clearly. A lot of emotional energy went into trying to fix misunderstandings or smooth over tension that was never really yours to carry in the first place. But see, back then, you believed that if you could just communicate better or try harder, things would eventually improve. But awareness changes that dynamic. See, when you've done the internal work, you start noticing patterns faster. You recognize familiar behaviors and realize that not every situation deserves or requires your participation or attention. Thank you for the heart, me. Welcome in, Terry. And so, it's like the same type of tension that once used to confuse you now feels obvious. You start to see the script while it's still being written instead of waiting for the story to play out. And what's powerful about this stage of healing is that your response gets quieter and quieter. You simply don't feel the need to argue, right? You don't have to argue your point or prove your worth. My quote of the year is, I don't argue with what I already know. I've reached that level of healing, y'all, right? Where I simply just observe what's happening and I make decisions based on what I see. If somebody shows me inconsistency, I adjust my expectations. If somebody reveals that they don't respect my boundaries, I create distance. It's not about being dramatic. It's not fueled by anger. It is simply clarity guiding my choices. And that clarity creates a completely different outcome. The same situation that once lasted months now resolves itself in a few days. That same emotional drain that kept you up at night barely disrupts your peace anymore. You're not trapped in, this cycle of trying to fix what isn't yours to fix. Instead, you're just allowing people's behavior to inform how much access they have to you moving forward. Because see, I'm very, very intentional about who I allow to experience me. This, is the moment where you start realizing that healing is not about becoming perfect. It's just simply about being more aware. It's about recognizing that you deserve peace and that your energy is valuable. And when that awareness becomes a part of how you move, you stop repeating the same patterns over and over again. And even though those same situations may still appear, the outcome changes because the version of you inside that moment is no longer operating from that hurt place. That's what real growth looks like. It's walking into a situation that once overwhelmed you and realizing that you have the tools and the awareness and the self-respect to handle things differently. Same situation, same opportunity for chaos, but this time, you see it clearly enough to move in a way that protects your peace. Because again, I'll say discernment is a quiet power. And I think that it is one of the most underrated forms of strength. Discernment doesn't look loud. It doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't require you to prove your point or win an argument. Discernment is the quiet ability to observe what's happening around you and understand what it means without rushing to react. When you develop discernment, you stop feeling the need to respond to every single situation immediately, right? Instead, you slow down long enough to see the full picture. Before we grow into this kind of awareness, a lot of our reactions come from emotion, right? When someone says something that hurts us, we feel the urge to defend ourselves immediately. When somebody misunderstands us, hey, Miss Blessed, hola, ¿cómo estás? When somebody misunderstands us, we want to explain ourselves, right? We want them to see our perspective. When somebody disrespects us, we may feel the need to confront them because he ain't gonna be talking to me like that, right? So we confront them so that way they understand how wrong they were. We want to hold people accountable. And while those reactions are very much human, they can also pull us into cycles of conflict that drain our energy. But discernment changes the way that you approach those moments. Instead of immediately reacting or overreacting, you pause. You notice how somebody communicates. You watch how consistent they are over time. You observe how they treat people when they have nothing to gain from the interaction. You listen carefully to the way that they talk about others, right? Because people often reveal their character through the stories that they tell. And none of this requires confrontation. It just requires your attention. When you move with discernment, you start seeing patterns clearly. You recognize when somebody's words don't match their behavior. You notice when somebody's supportive only when it's benefiting them. You recognize when someone's energy is shifting, depending upon who's around. Instead of trying to fix these patterns or call them out, you just let the behavior speak for itself. You allow time to confirm what you've already begun to sense. And this approach protects your peace in ways that constant reaction never could. You are no longer pulled into unnecessary debates about who's right and who's wrong. You're not trying to convince people to understand your intentions. Instead, you just simply allow people to reveal themselves through their actions. Okay, he said what he said. She did what she did. I felt how I felt. It is what it is. I'm moving on, right? Once you see, that clearly, you can make decisions about your boundaries and your distance and the level of engagement without needing anybody else's agreement. And, discernment also brings a level of emotional stability. When you understand that not every single situation deserves a response, you begin to conserve your energy. You become more selective about where you invest your attention and, where you simply just observe and move on. That shift allows you to focus more of your time and your energy on the actual relationship and the environments that actually support your growth and well-being. And there's also this quiet confidence that comes with this stage of healing. You're no longer feeling pressured to react to every single challenge or prove your perspective to everyone who questions it. This confidence now allows you to trust your ability to recognize the truth through observation and experience. And that trust allows you to move through the situation calmly, knowing that clarity will reveal itself over time. And when you move with that level of discernment, you start to realize that you don't have to expose people. You don't have to chase explanations. In fact, I always say the trash takes itself out. Most people reveal everything that you need to know simply by being themselves long enough. Your role isn't to force them, force that truth to surface. Welcome in, Cheyenne. Right? Your role is to simply remain present, to pay attention, and to honor what you see once it becomes clear. Not everything requires a reaction. And I know that is a difficult lesson for a lot of people because we didn't grow up in some real toxic situations where clapping back is all we had. But let's go ahead and talk about, this thing that healing eventually teaches you, again, that nobody taught us growing up. Not everything requires your reaction. And I know that it sounds simple, but if you've ever been the kind of person who feels like you need to defend yourself or explain yourself or correct every misunderstanding, then you know how hard this lesson can be. Because when somebody says something about you that is not true, your natural instinct is to jump in and fix it. When somebody disrespects you, your spirit wants to stand up and say something back. When somebody plays, with your name or your character, something inside of you says, hold on, we need to address this. And listen, sometimes we do, because boundaries matter. Self-respect matters. But healing teaches you that some people are not looking for an understanding. They're looking for your reaction. They want that exchange of energy. They want the drama. They with the shits. Right? They want the moment where you step out of your peace and step into chaos with them. They want to prove that you are not yet healed, which is why I tell people I'm healing. I'm not yet healed. Right? But again, for those people, chaos is where they're comfortable. So they throw little comments, little jabs, and little sideways energy. And the old version of you would have taken the bait, right? You would have been like, oh, so this is what we doing? You get the clapping, right? Let's talk about it. Right? And the next thing you know, you're in this whole back and forth argument, debate, conversation, right? That didn't even deserve your time or energy in the first place. But see, the healed version of you starts to notice something different. That healed version of you, or the healing version of you, right, starts to recognize that some people are simply just auditioning for your reaction. And when you don't give it to them, oh baby, it confuses them, right? Because they expect a performance. They expect you to jump in and argue. They expect you to defend yourself. But instead, you just sitting there like, yeah, this what we doing today? Okay, interesting. Proceed, right? And I'm not saying that the petty part of you is going to disappear completely. We love petty, okay? Let's not lie in this space today. We all about keeping it real. So again, sometimes that healed version of you is still going to just sit and watch the situation unfold quietly, like, a documentary narrator in the back of your mind. You're going to sit there sometimes and still observe, wow, they really thought they was going to get a reaction out of me today. Right? Thank you so much, Cheyenne. Cheyenne done found the music. Okay, y'all. Life changing. Thank you, Cheyenne. And so again, sometimes you're just sitting there and you're looking at everything unfold like, okay, this is what we're going to do. Let me see how this plays out. Because again, I think the truth that many people don't realize is that when somebody is trying to provoke you and you stay calm, two things happen. First, they expose their own behavior. Second, they lose the control that they thought they had over your emotions. And some people cannot handle that. And so what happens? They escalate. They get louder. They try harder to poke at you. And meanwhile, you're just sitting there like, oh, so now we escalating, right? Okay, go ahead. Proceed, right? That's my word. When I see people revealing themselves, I'm like, proceed, carry on, Because sometimes I think that the most powerful thing that you can do is just to let people keep talking. Let them keep showing their character. Let them keep revealing their intentions, because eventually the truth comes out. And when the truth does come out without you forcing it, that clarity hits different. Now, again, it's not about being passive. It's about being intentional. You're not ignoring disrespect because you're weak. You're choosing your responses because you are aware. You are aware that every argument isn't worth your peace. You are aware that every accusation doesn't deserve your defense. You're aware that some people are committed to misunderstanding you no matter what explanation you give. And once you realize that, you stop exhausting yourself trying to be understood by people who have already committed to misunderstanding you. They've already made their minds up. So instead, you just adjust your access. You adjust your energy. You adjust how much of yourself that you give to that situation. And you do so quietly, respectfully, but firmly. And sometimes that petty part of your spirit is still just sitting there smiling just a little bit because you already know something that they don't. When people keep playing games long enough, they eventually find out, right? And not to be funny, life eventually hands that find out itself. And the best part is you didn't even have to crash out to get there. Most of the time when people F around, karma helps them find out. And here's something else that people don't always tell you about healing. Growth doesn't mean that it's easy, that, these situations disappear. The same types of personalities are still going to show up. The same types of conversations will still happen. The same opportunities for chaos will still walk right up to your door like they didn't learn the lesson the first time. But the difference is not that life suddenly stopped presenting the challenge. The difference is that you are no longer the same person standing in the situation. And that's what changes things. Because see, the old version of you might take the bait. The old version of you might have gotten pulled back and forth. You might have spent hours replaying the conversations or, trying to prove your point, trying to make somebody understand what they were never going to understand in the first place. I mean, if we're being honest, some of y'all are professional explainers. Like, y'all deserve a check. You write paragraphs, you send voice notes, you write 3-part explanations with emotional context and supporting evidence. I mean, y'all deserve a check. Meanwhile, the person that you're explaining yourself to is over there, like they're watching a movie that they already decided they don't like. Movie opens up and they're like, I don't want to hear this shit. Let me piss her off real quick. That'll shut her up. Right? But see, healing changes all of that. Not because you suddenly stop caring about people, but because you finally start caring about yourself and your peace more. Now, when that situation pops up, we start to notice it quicker. You see the patterns forming before that drama fully loads. And instead of getting pulled into the situation, you just think, here we go again. Right? This is interesting. We're not going to panic. You don't have to rush to defend yourself. You don't have to, start explaining your intentions to somebody who has already decided the narrative. You just get to watch. Because people will absolutely try to approach you with the same energy that they used to. They'll try those same little comments, those same manipulative tactics, the same emotional hooks that they used to get a reaction out of you. But now you're looking at the situation like somebody who's already seen the movie. You know how the plot twist goes, right? You know where the twist takes place and how that ending is going to play out. So instead of you getting emotionally invested, you just sit there and allow the scene to unfold. You stay grounded in yourself. And sometimes that growth simply just looks like you hearing the comment, you recognizing the intention, and internally you see what's happening. But externally you stay calm and quiet and unmoved, unbothered, unfuckwittable, right? Because one of the most powerful signs of healing is when somebody tries to pull you back into drama and you realize that you simply don't feel the urge to participate anymore. And nothing confuses people more than when they expect chaos and you hand them calm. It's like they showed up ready to fight and you over here protecting your peace like, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not clocking in for that shift today. You better prepare the others because I ain't coming. That doesn't mean that you're passive. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It simply means that you finally understand that energy is valuable and you're no longer spending it on situations that don't deserve it. Sometimes the quietest response carries the loudest message. Because when you refuse to engage with people's nonsense, the nonsense has nowhere to go. People who were hoping for drama are left standing there holding all that messy shit by themselves. And that moment right there, that is growth in action. Same situation, just a different day. Same opportunity for chaos, but we're going to handle it in a different way. This is what we call learning by experience, right? Because at the end of the day, life has a way of teaching us lessons whether we're ready for them or not. Some of those lessons come through calm reflection. Some of them come through situations that push every last nerve that you got. And if we're being honest in this room today, a lot of our greatest clarity didn't come from us sitting down and explaining things nicely. It came from experience. The kind of experience that you look back at later and you're like, yeah, that was an expensive lesson. Because, sometimes you really do have to live through something to understand it. People can warn you, right? They can share stories. They can even give you advice from their own scars. But there are moments where you just have to move through a situation on your own before the truth finally clicks. That's when life gives you a moment where the dots connect and you realize, oh, now I see what they were talking about. Right, Harold? And let's be honest, some of those moments come after we've ignored, about 20 early hints where life was whispering, but we were too busy explaining things away. The signs were there, but we didn't want to believe them. We wanted to see the best in people. We wanted to believe that somebody would do better next time. We wanted to think that the situation would eventually fix itself. Meanwhile, life was standing there like, all right, you're not going to listen to this little gentle version of the lesson. We're going to go ahead and throw you into that accelerated, upgraded curriculum. And sometimes that upgraded lesson feels like a crash course in clarity. Right? The situation finally revealed itself so clearly that there was no way that you could misunderstand it. You see the pattern. You see the intention. You see the dramatics, right? You see the dynamic for what it is. And there's a moment where you realize, you almost laugh because you realize, wow, this really played out exactly, the way my intention warned me it would. And that's where I think your petty part of healing comes in, right? It kicks in because sometimes after that realization, you're sitting there thinking, you know what? I probably should have listened to my gut in the first place. But at the time, you recognize that experience itself gave you a new lesson or a new level of awareness that you didn't have before. It's like I always look back at my life and I'm like, no regrets, because even the bad decisions that I made taught me something. right? That situation taught you how to recognize similar patterns earlier the next time. It sharpens your discernment. It sharpened your boundaries. It showed you how certain dynamics operate so you can spot them quicker moving forward. And that's the part that I think that people don't talk about enough. Even messy experiences have something to teach you if you're willing to learn. You have to be teachable though, right? Because those lessons, show you what you tolerate. They show you where you still doubt yourself. They show you how to respond under pressure. And once you see those things clearly, you gain the ability to move differently the next time life presents a similar situation. And I think that that's where the shift really happens. Instead of waiting for things to explode and it turning into a full out, F around and find out moment, you begin to catch the signals earlier. You feel them. You feel that situation developing. You notice the tone of the conversation and you recognize those familiar patterns forming. And instead of ignoring them this time, right? And ignoring them until they turn into chaos, you simply just step back and say, I see where this is headed. That awareness allows you to make different choices. Choices to create distance sooner, to set boundaries earlier. You adjust your expectations before your energy gets drained. And suddenly, the situation that once would have turned into a full emotional storm barely disrupts your peace at all. Because once life teaches you the lesson, right? And once it teaches you that lesson clearly enough, you don't need to keep repeating that course. You're already seeing how the story ends. You've already experienced the outcome. So now when a similar situation begins to unfold, you just recognize it for what it is and you move on. And sometimes the quietest part of growth is just simply realizing that you don't need to prove yourself anymore. You've already learned the lesson. You've already seen, how certain dynamics play out. So when life presents you with a familiar energy, you simply observe it. You adjust and you keep your peace intact. That's the wisdom that comes from experience. The lesson may have been messy at the time, but the clarity that it left behind gives you the ability to move through the next situation with awareness instead of reaction. And that awareness allows you to feel the situation and find out the truth without having to crash out to get there. So family, let's bring this whole conversation full circle. Because again, today we started with the phrase that everybody knows, F around and find out. And again, we know that that phrase didn't come from nowhere. It came from lived experiences. It came from moments where people pushed past our boundaries, ignored our warnings, and kept testing the limits until the consequences finally showed up and punched them in the face. That energy is the language of someone who has already tried patience. Someone who has already tried explaining. Someone who has already tried giving grace. It's the moment where the message becomes very simple. Play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. You keep playing with the situation. Now the lesson is about to teach itself. But once healing starts to show up, there is another way to move through it. Not just the F around and find out, but that feel around and find out. Because awareness changes everything. When you slow down enough to pay attention to your intuition, when you start trusting the signals that your body is giving you, when you learn how to observe people's patterns instead of arguing with them, life becomes a lot clearer. You start noticing the energy before it begins or before it shifts into the chaos, right? You hear the tone of people's voice. You recognize the inconsistencies between somebody's words and their actions. And instead of waiting until you're frustrated or drained or about to crash out, you simply just step back and say, I see. I see what you're saying. I see what you're doing right there. Because healing doesn't mean that life is going to stop presenting challenges. It just means that as you heal, you start to recognize them faster. You're more aware, more grounded, more connected to your own peace. And when you're tapped in, that gives you more options because you start to recognize that you don't have to argue with every misunderstanding. You don't have to defend yourself against every accusation, and you do not have to participate in every piece of drama that somebody hands you. You just sit back and you let people reveal themselves. You let patterns play out, and you let the truth surface without forcing it. Because when you move through life with that discernment instead of reaction, you start to realize that you don't have to chase clarity. Clarity eventually shows up on its own. So maybe the real lesson in today is that not every situation requires a fight. Not every misunderstanding requires an explanation, and not every challenge requires you to lose your peace to prove a point. Sometimes the most healed response is simply paying attention. Feel the situation. Observe the pattern. And trust that life will reveal exactly what you need to know when you need to know it. So as you move through the rest of your day, remember, you don't have to live in a constant F around and find out energy. You can move with awareness instead. And if you still want to F around and find out, shift it and feel around and find out. Trust that the truth will reveal itself. And remember, if this conversation resonated with you today, drop those green hearts in the chat. That is our way of saying, I'm healing, I'm growing, I'm showing up for me. And if you know somebody who needs this reminder, go ahead and share this episode with them. Because again, sometimes the most powerful thing that we can do for each other is to create space for honest conversations about growth and boundaries and protecting your peace. Before we wrap it up today, I do just want to leave you all with a little extra love and light. As always, I am here to encourage you to keep breathing through the highs, the lows, and every moment in between. I want you to keep choosing peace, even if it feels out of reach. And know that here at the Self-Care Club and the Room to Breathe family, you will always be seen, always valued, and always supported. So don't be afraid to take up space, speak your truth, and make a little room to breathe. I love each and every one of you to life. And I am praying that your day is not just amazing, but aligned, intentional, and yes, on purpose, filled with purpose. This has been another Room to Breathe podcast, and I cannot wait to connect with you all again soon. Thank you.
Me,